I wonder if he could explain how he expects to achieve the adult social care model provision cuts of 459 million in the current year, 712 in the following year. These are very precise figures, so I guess you must have detailed plans on how that's going to work.
As you're aware, we have delivered this emergency budget in a very quick time frame. So no, there are not detailed plans in terms of what will not be continued and how things will change. The review of this provision, as I made clear in my speech, relates to extra care, daycare, reablement and stages across those services. We don't know what they will look like as yet. But to make those savings, there will be changes across those services. There is a possibility that we will set up a local authority traded company to run some of those services to move away from the current model. But that is one possibility that's on the table that might bring forward a better model alongside having to make some of the reductions that we simply have to make because of the scale of the challenge that is before us.
Thank you. Not much extra information there then. Library efficiencies. This is a cut of £100,000 this year and another £100,000 next year. How inefficient are our libraries then?
This proposal is from the February budget, so it's not an additional proposal for this budget.
Wigmore has no library or internet connection for the whole residents.
Residential care cut to £400,000 on page 50. Is this a renegotiation with the private care home providers, please?
Really, sadly, we're anticipating that it might not be quite £400,000, which is an upside to very much what is a downside, a very sad situation with deaths of so many people in care homes because of coronavirus. There will be fewer users, and that was the original assumption. Thankfully, that saving probably won't be quite £400,000 in year because the numbers tailed off, thankfully.
Thank you very much indeed. Move on to page 51. Leisure and cultural estate cut of very large cut. Again, very precise figures, 1.649 million in the current year and 825,000 next year. Where have I got that from? 825,000 in the current year and the same next year, a total of 1.649. Again, it's a very precise figure, so should we presume there are detailed plans?
Again, you should have asked that in February because this February budget proposal, the ones in the first column and the second column are ones from February. The ones in solely the second column, or if the numbers have changed, are ones for this changes for this emergency budget. We have to present them side by side because we're in the unprecedented situation of running an in-year emergency budget to supplement the original 2020-2021 budget. That is about that saving was about making changes to the estate, and that is something that we are in conversation with our providers about.
I recall I did ask it in February. I didn't get an answer then either, so you clearly haven't worked it out yet. Where should we go next? Neighbourhood enforcement team, £170,000. Are you satisfied that the council is able to enforce all the things it should be enforcing now? And how do you expect it to perform once you've made this cut, so your enforcement stops at 6 in the evening instead of 10?
So this saving is, yes, some slightly reduced hours of operation, so there won't be evening patrols anymore, but also a reduction of a third in the number of posts, so from 12 posts total down to 8 posts. Actually, in terms of what the service will deliver, all those posts are currently vacant, and it has been historically challenging to employ to that team. So I'm hopeful that broadly the standards enforcement will remain as is. And as I said in my speech, it is a really important part of our approach to delivering improvements to our town. And I'm pleased that we are keeping elements of it, although with the scale of what we're facing, having to see some reductions in places.
Okay. Service reduction in regulatory services due to vacant posts, 183,000. First question has to be, do you think the fact that there are vacant posts is a good reason for reducing the service? And what are you going to stop regulating?
Nothing will stop being regulated, as you're well aware. Where there are vacant posts and they're not filled by agency staff, it means that there are those roles, those services are being covered by a smaller number of employees. And some of the changes a reduced number of staff in that area will require, for some of those services, a changed model of operation. But actually that will be in line with the changes that we're outlining for customer services. There are many front-facing areas of the council, not just in customer services, which can also make changes in line with what the service delivery has had to look like over the coronavirus period. So there's almost a model in place there that we can now move to for some of these things.
Okay. Are you anticipating any reduction, for example, in regulation of the hygiene standards in food establishments?
No.
A direct answer for once.
Yes, that's some reassurance. You're cutting highway maintenance by just under £400,000. How much longer do you suggest I tell my constituents they will have to wait for potholes to be filled and roads to be resurfaced?
I believe potholes should be filled within 24 hours as set out in our policy. We're not changing the policy, it's just that we've had some additional funding that we're able to make this in-year one-off saving. As you can see from the documents, that it is a one-off saving. We've had some additional funding that allows us to make this, to fill this budget problem that we are facing.
Okay, school crossing patrols, £23,000. Is this actually cancelling school crossing patrols, or is it passing yet more of the burden onto the schools?
This is discontinuing school crossing patrols where they aren't officially fully required in line with current vacancies. So it's not passing any responsibility on, it is where they're not necessarily fully needed, and there are already vacancies in place that allow us to make these savings.
Okay, garden waste collections then, £300,000. How many brown bins are you expecting to empty?
I think we've modelled this on around 35% take-up, those lines, and it's a £35 charge.
Okay, if you divide your £300,000 by 35, that means you will be emptying about 8,500, between 8,500 and 9,000 bins. Currently emptying 45,000 brown bins. What's going to happen to the garden waste from the 37,000 bins that you're currently emptying but don't expect to be emptying when the brown bin tax comes in?
Well, some of it might end up at the local tidy tips, or people uptake might be considerably higher than we've currently modelled, or people might compost more in their gardens. I'm sure there are a number of options that you're well aware of to answer your question.
Working on the assumption that none of it will be blighted then?
know what? I'm really hopeful that the Venn diagram for people who fly tip and people who have a brown bin and use it regularly are actually quite far apart and don't overlap very much. Also, I think this is a proposal for people who called in and wrote in to say, could we pay more council tax to help you get through this really challenging situation?
Oh,
there are
don't be
people out there
ridiculous.
who want to support the council more, and there will be people who want to buy this service so that they can continue to use it and also provide that support to the council.
What? Is your hearing aid?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. That will do for the moment, Mr. Mayor.
Well done, David.
I might as well give notice now that at the appropriate time I would like to make a comment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Frank. I would like to invite Councillor John Young, Conservative Group Leader, to ask questions. He's got 20 minutes.
Managed to deliver the £21.6 million of savings, and in relation to the £7.5 million that you mentioned, they are already offset by contingencies written into the budget because we know we were unlikely to deliver them in full this year as well. So there is the detail in the report around how much we're expecting to make use of reserves to get through this crisis, but we have no choice but to act now. Otherwise, the use of reserves just increases. At least if we act now, we can start making some of the savings that we need to make after today to try and get our budget back into line. But the details of how much we anticipate using in terms of our reserves are set out in the report at paragraph 59.
So does that mean that the savings will be put forward to the following year and again onto the following year, so that in fact, in theory, they never happen?
Sorry. Need to happen. They absolutely must happen, and they will not be brought forward year on year. They are as detailed in the papers. They are detailed for this financial year and for next financial year, and some of them are cumulative and increase over those 2 years. Because some of these things are going to take a little bit of time to deliver. Usually a budget setting process takes 7 months. It's been done in around 7 or 8 weeks this time. So of course it's going to take a bit of a while. And I would actually note for yourself and other members that in the table that sets out all of the budget proposals, where there is a 1 or a 2 in the final column in terms of the equality impact on equalities, unless that is an internal reorganisation and doesn't need policy approval, the vast majority of those where there is a 1 or 2 in that final column will come through for additional scrutiny, either to Scrutiny Finance Review or through the exec before they are implemented. I think that's a really important point for away with. So we're not fundamentally agreeing all of these things, no turning back. There's still opportunity to consider their impact and mitigate that impact as we move towards delivering on these savings. But we have no choice but to deliver savings so as to not be in a predicament where our income doesn't match our expenditure. We have to deliver this budget and we have to make these savings, which is why those monthly meetings that I referenced are happening with myself, the Chief Finance Officer and the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm. The departments with the largest potential impact is children's, families and education, well-being and public health. These departments, the savings required are about 10 million. These services are demand-led. Big times, demand is likely to increase. So how would you square the circle?
I think it's a really good question. I enjoyed participating in the meeting with young people who asked a similar question. We got to similar ground actually. There's the statutory services that we have to provide, which you're referencing there, where we might see increased demand, which we'll have to cope with. There's targeted early intervention services, and then there's universal services. Quite a bit of what this budget does is that we can't afford these universal services anymore, particularly in relation to children's centres, we're going to have to take a more targeted approach, more early intervention approach to delivering that. In relation to statutory services, that is what that £7.5 million that you mentioned in your previous question is all about. It's about improving our efficiency and delivering the best value for money that we can deliver as a council in terms of those statutory services that we have to deliver. We need to deliver and we want to deliver to support those who are missing out in life on privileged opportunities. But we can still make savings there, but they're of a different type, because it's all about making sure the service you're delivering is as efficient and as much value for money as possible. Whereas some of those other areas, you want to maintain early intervention to avoid spend, and that's what we keep an eye on a lot of the time. But then ideally you would have universal services, but with the massive reduction in money that we have available to deliver services as outlined in this budget, one of the changes is around children's and family support, early help, children's centres, contact centre and disability support, and that is moving from more of a universal service to more of a targeted service.
Thank you very much, Councillor Malcolm. Unfortunately, that's all the questions I'm allowed to ask. Thank you very much.
Why are so many councillors on the airport board?
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. I'll go. I have 6 people waiting for the questioning now. So first of all, I would like to ask Councillor Haji Abid to ask question. Abid.
Chair, Chair, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Simply wanted to ask, are there any minimum level the airport dividends contractually that the airport's supposed to make annually?
He hasn't got his picture up. Oh.
Andy Malcolm.
Mr. Mayor, just to confirm.
Yeah, Councillor Simmons, please.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. My apologies. Based on passengers, the passengers we have through the airport each year, that's based on that. And it's part of our concession agreement.
Who's at the back man? Gary Roberts?
Looks like it.
Abid, you okay?
Oh, strange she's gone offline now.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks.
Somebody helping her.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Councillor Keynes. He wants to make comments. Councillor Keynes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I'm concerned, and I'm sure my committee, Children's Services, are concerned about the level of cuts that we're going to have to make. Sterling work has already been done by the children's officers and social workers. We're worried that this could be reduced. I'm willing to sit with Councillor Malcolm any time and see if we can do something to make some of these cuts a lot softer. I appreciate it's a big problem that we've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keynes. I will certainly happy to take up that offer to attend Children's Scrutiny Review Group if you'd like me to come along, or meet beforehand even. One of the things that I am doing in relation to those £7.5 million of savings that Councillor Young mentioned is I am meeting with the children, aim on delivering some of those service improvements, which are that first type where it's statutory services that we absolutely have to deliver, but we want to deliver them at the best quality, but also to improve efficiency so that we're not spending money that we don't need to spend on them. But yeah, absolutely, if you want to meet to talk that through and see if there's anything that your scrutiny group can do to contribute to that process, absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
I greatly appreciate that, Councillor. Yeah, you can let me know when meetings, etc., etc. I'm available most times. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Councillor Keith. Just going to remind members, this is question only session. So we got Councillor Wynne now. Councillor Wynne.
Yes, sorry, I've just coming back online. I've had everything muted. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. At the previous Budget Council meeting on the 19th of February, I was critical of the original LBC budget at that time and described it as a reckless gamble. And of course I understand how much the COVID-19 has been critical to proving that point. But if I may just go through and ask a very specific question. Councillor Malcolm has strongly emphasised that we should always be taking the least worst option. And Councillor Simmons explained very clearly that the additional loans to LLAL, and I might say also to Vauxhall Homes Limited, will go through the normal council processes. I would ask
Where's this picture up?
a real least worst option, which is to ask the boards of directors of LLAL and of Vauxhall Homes to pass board resolutions to return some of the previous loans they've already had to LBC. That way round, we would avoid having to make further loans. That is my question. Can we please get the two boards of directors to pass resolutions to return loans they have already received but not yet used?
Silence was a stern reply.
You won't get interest.
Hello? Mr. Mayor?
Yep, Councillor Simmons, yep.
Is it okay to answer? Yeah. I'm not sure that's a very practical question, really, because the people have obviously already borrowed the money to do things with. But the reality is, we actually get interest from those loans, so that is income that the council receives. Consequently, we would. We would not go back to the board and ask them to do that request.
Councillor Simmons, may I suggest that that's not an appropriate answer because we are lending them more money in order that they can pay the interest.
There is.
That is not true for Vauxhall Homes.
We are not lending them any more money. That's not what is in the report before you.
I would imagine that those loans would be on a fixed term, and if you break, there would be breakout clause. You could lose more money by breaking the
Thank you very much. We're moving on to the next question. Councillor Jeff Patton, please.
Sorry?
Are there any amendments? Oh,
Jeff is here.
you're back.
My question is.
Ask a question, yeah? Go on.
Yeah, my question is that we're all aware of the number of agency social workers, and the cost of that is enormous. I think we'll probably have to reduce that number. What's the likely impact on our social care?
Thank you. This is one of those first areas of savings where it's a statutory obligation, so the level of service provided is not going to change. We're still going to deliver that service, absolutely. And actually, this is one of those areas of savings from the 7.5 million that was mentioned previously in another question that I'm keeping tabs on because it relates to children's services, so I'm keeping a close eye on some of those. What I would say is that we have a plan to reduce children's social work down further to below 10% of the social work workforce by February 2022. So that's something that you can keep an eye on and that we will all want to keep an eye on. We are developing a social work academy and developing our use of growing our own social workers, and that's one of the reasons keeping our targeted youth service was really important for us, because that is a route by which people can enter the organisation without a qualification for social work but then become trained up in time and move into social work roles. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Andy. Yes, it does. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pat. We are moving on to next items. Are there any amendments? Are there any amendments? No, thank you very much. Now we are moving on to next item. Does any member wish to speak to the motion? I've got a couple of names already. You are who have indicated already they're going to make comments. So first of all, I would like to call. Please.
Sorry, you broke up. We didn't hear who you called.
Yeah, Councillor Jackie Burnett.
Oh, thank you. I have to say, in reflecting and listening to the presentation, I've written down some things with a heavy heart, and one of the things that's I've written down, I'm reminded when the pandemic started and I could see what was coming. It was like a shipwreck that was happening, and on the day the government made the statement that they were going to walk shoulder to shoulder with its citizens and with local authority. And now, 4 months later, I can't see nobody behind us supporting us. Yeah, we're crying out for help, having to lead the worst public health crisis in 100 years in living memory. And where's the government? And it's really hard to not talk about the situation we are and other local authorities that are falling right behind us, and leave aside politics and don't put some context to it. Yeah, and the government has been totally two-faced to local government is how I feel. Yeah, because we're having to still lead, we're having to still protect the public, we're still having to work with public health. Yeah, and they've just left us high and dry. And I'm just minded of some of the other comments we've had today. We, Labour, have demonstrated during austerity the level of savings that we achieved and still delivered service. And I really do hope that gives some level of reassurance as the robustness to us as a Labour administration in Luton, that we will do all that we can to protect our citizens. And the other word that came to mind today was financial stewardship.
Oh, Luton can't talk about that.
That's what we're trying to do. We are trying to be planning, we're trying to attention to keep management under control, and we're trying to care. We have tried to care, and we have always tried to care for our citizens. But we're left without the promise that the government has given us. And my worry, is we can't take what the government says, that we can even bank their promise on so many things they've let down citizens. But I can't really say much more, because every time I talk sometimes I get a bit upset, and that the emotions is more anger and but we're competent, we've demonstrated that we're competent, and I really do thank officers for all what they have done in these unprecedented times, and I really am so proud of the community in taking part in the consultation and trying to come up with solutions. So thank you, Mayor, for allowing me this time to comment, but it really is with a heavy heart that we are doing this, and I really hope the government somehow finds the light and realise and remember the promises they made when we were going into this pandemic, which they were ill prepared for and left us high and dry.
No government in the world has given more to their citizens than Boris Johnson's government. All the furloughs they paid.
Councillor Khan, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Can I first of all start with thanking all the members and all the officers for doing everything they can in managing these crises, public safe, supporting the communities, supporting our most vulnerable and our frontline services. So thank you all for doing all you can to keep our Luton safe. Secondly, I want to thank our portfolio holder, Andy Malcolm, for doing a tremendous job in trying to manage these worst financial crises that we've seen in the history of our town. We do have to recognize that we are in difficult situation, we are in unusual circumstances, and we do accept the challenges from the opposition. But what we do accept is want to them to understand is this financial situation no one could plan for. Only a few months ago we were being praised for our innovation, we were being praised for managing the austerity cuts. You can plan for everything else but not the disaster or the crisis that we are facing now. Unfortunately, it's the government, like Jackie said, who has left us and the people of Luton on our own to manage the worst crisis that we face. We're the second most worst town affected in the country, and we would expect, like our MPs and our Member of Parliaments and Lords who have rallied around to ask the government that we need special consideration, and we would like the support of the opposition to ask the government to intervene and give us a rescue package. Some of the services will have to be delivered in a different way. It's not just Luton, it's the rest of the country and the rest of the world. Some of those universal services may never return back again. We have to look at prevention, and we have to look at early help and targeted support. With the amount of resources, it has to be targeted. So again, I'd like to thank all the officers, all the members across the party for doing a fantastic job to keep our Luton and our public safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Khan. I would like to invite Councillor Shaw to make comments. Councillor Shaw, please.
Yeah. Councillor Wynne mentioned Vauxhall loans. I think he's a little bit behind on some of the reports. This weekend we had the first open day on the site at Solway Road, and every one of the private properties has now got a name by it and a reserve by it to buy those properties. With those sales, we will start paying back the council on the loans, and it also gives us more money to go elsewhere. And the board last week agreed that Vauxhall is becoming one of the council's success stories, where the interest on the loans will actually help the general fund not have to make so many cuts. So as a businessman, I'm surprised that you can't see the value of Vauxhall loans. We've taken people off our list. We've actually put people into social housing. And the next site, Sunderland Park, which is going to be finished in the next few weeks, so that'll be the second one complete, is going to be for key workers from the council. So please don't use Vauxhall loans for your own ends when it's such a success for the council, paying back money, housing people and social housing as well. It's a success no matter how much Councillor Wynne and the other councillors from Wigmore try and kick it. It's a great success. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Can I just comment? Councillor Franks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to revisit some of the key considerations that the Liberal Democrat members have had to take into account when considering our attitude to this emergency budget. And perhaps the first thing I have to say is
that in spite of what the Leader of the Council said in response to a question earlier, it's quite clear from the reports that we have before us this evening that a significant part of the £83 million it is proposed to loan the airport company is going to be used to pay the interest on money that the council. There are two weird issues here. First of all, you're borrowing money to loan to the airport so it can pay interest on the money you've already loaned it. And secondly, even more worrying, I guess, is that I reckon the total that the airport company currently owes the council is in the region of £400 million. Add the £83 million and that gets you closer to £500 million. One is reminded that in a situation where the level of debt that they had was so large that their business was unable to maintain it, Debenhams twice went into administration in the last 2 years in circumstances similar to those that you're pushing your airport company to. So there are dangers there, and I hope that someone at least is keeping a close eye on it. On the council tax reduction scheme, you've already introduced a scheme which is forcing the poorest households in Luton to pay an extra £900 that they can't afford in council tax. You're now planning to make the same hard-up families pay another £220 a year that they can't afford. I really don't understand how you can seriously expect the Liberal Democrat members to support that, because we certainly won't. Adult social care. I thought everybody knew that adult social care is massively underfunded everywhere. Apparently not in Luton, it seems, because you're going to take another £2 million over 2 years. And that's in addition to the £150,000 cut you've already approved, which you're still hoping to achieve by closing St Monica's Day Centre. Where do we go from here? Well, Luton must have the most inefficient libraries in Britain.
And Wigmore has no library.
We're going to cut £200,000 from the library's budget. You said you were going to do it in February. You've had from February to July to work out how you're going to do it. And yet, in response to a question this evening, you still can't tell us how you're going to achieve that. That's incredible. If you haven't worked it out in those 6 months, how on earth are you going to work it out in the rest of the year? A question, please. £1.1 to be cut over 2 years. Have we learned nothing at all about the value of our public health service in the last few months? I think that's the one service that we really by now ought to understand the true value of. Moving on, the biggest fairy tale of the lot, of course. Yeah, it keeps coming up. You're going to charge the bus companies £20,000 a year for using the busway. I don't know how many times they've told you that they won't pay. And in one case, they've actually spelled it out that if you insist on charging for using the busway, they'll simply stop using it and go back to using the ordinary roads instead. The fairy tale. But you persist in pushing it forward. This must be the third or fourth time I've seen it on budget papers. Nothing's happened to it yet. Where do we go from here? Leisure and cultural estate. It's that same story. You've got very precise figures in the budget for your cuts, but you can't explain how that's going to be achieved at all.
Well, we've been saying for ages that Luton Council is pretty hopeless at enforcing anything. I just wonder how many dangerous speeding drivers you're going to catch, how many fly tippers, how many persistent litterers. When you're cutting the service from 12 staff down to 8, I think the answer is that being pretty hopeless at enforcing things, it is a good comparison to where you're going to end up with this one. If I was anything to do with deciding on the resources that need to be made available for highways maintenance in Luton, I've got to tell you, I wouldn't be boasting about it when I meet my mates in the pub. Not the officers, of course. They do their best with the resources they're given. But with a near £400,000 cut in highway maintenance, our highways, the condition of our highways, which in some cases are pretty poor now, are going to get a good deal worse. There's no way to avoid it. On the £35 a year for garden bins, yeah, you're currently emptying about 45,000 bins every fortnight. You're going to end up emptying about just over 8,000 bins per fortnight. Bins you're currently emptying that you won't be emptying, and I wouldn't mind betting that a fair amount of that rubbish is going to end up fly tipped, and you're going to be spending more than the cost of emptying the bins in order to clear it up. And we haven't even touched on the damage you're doing to the Education Improvement Service, to children's social care, to the local safeguarding board, the Family Resource Service, children in need and looked after children. We haven't even touched on those issues in any serious way this evening. We told you when you set the budget in February that you were setting a very high-risk budget. We accept that no one could have predicted the coronavirus crisis. It has affected all local authorities, and no other local authority in the country is in anything like this kind of mess. All this is because our Labour Council has awarded its airport sacred cow status. Everything has to be sacrificed for the airport, and as usual, the poorest and most needy residents are going to have to pay the price. We cannot support this budget. We will not support this budget. I ask the Liberal Democrat members here this evening to vote against it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
This are outnumbered anyway, so Labour just push things through.
I would like to ask Councillor Young to make comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Following on Councillor Khan's request that the opposition should help the council, I saw on the photograph with Rachel and Hazel down in London with the 10,000 signature petition. I don't think it got very far. And I also watched the Luton South MP Rachel ask a question of the Prime Minister, and I think the general view was that she got short change from the Prime Minister. At the same time, I initiated a letter on behalf of the Conservative Party in the Conservative group on the Luton Borough Council, and I sent a letter to get always confused. Anyway, the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the local government minister, explaining our unique situation about 2 weeks ago, and I hope maybe we'll get a positive response in the way I did one about 18 months, 2 years ago. Yes, we are in a difficult position. I've lived in Luton now for just over 25 years, and I classify myself as a member of the Luton fraternity, and therefore the Conservative group will be voting for the budget. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. Now we are moving on to the next item. I'm going to pass it on to Chief Executive to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe I get to sum up before Hazel sums up in relation to those recommendations. So, thank you, Jackie, for your comments. Those were powerful words, and I do feel the emotion as well in having to move this budget, take this approach to deal with the situation that we're in. I thank you, Councillor Aslam Khan, as well, for reminding us that we are in a unique situation. All of local government has been pushed right up to the cliff edge by austerity, but we are more impacted. We own a regionally, nationally significant, which is inappropriate that we invest in. Councillor Tom Shaw provided some helpful clarity on the role of our subsidiaries and the way in which they generate income. And there are some helpful tables for members interested in the role of London Luton Airport Limited in relation to year-on-year increases in funding that comes to the council from that subsidiary. I would absolutely like to thank Councillor Young for being supportive. I would echo Jackie's words that it is an emotional subject, and I've been very critical of the government, so for you to still stand up and be supportive of this budget, and for your Conservative colleagues to do so as well, really means something to us. So thank you for that, and thank you for all the support that you provided in writing letters and lobbying government. Which takes us to Lib Dems, who seem willfully ignorant of reality somewhat. So I won't actually paint all Lib Dems with the same brush. Not everyone has